sponsored by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Nigeria.
Welcome back to this discussion around financing agriculture in Nigeria. We have a distinguished panel of experts and bankers and capital market operators who are giving, of course, useful insights into how we can change things in Nigeria and, of course, take the transformation to the next level. Of course, co-moderating with me is the Director General of Nigeria Securities and Exchange Commission, Arumote. It's great to have you again. Aruma, can you just, over to you.
Thank you. Before the break, we asked Mr. David around lessons from the U.S. experience. I think Ms. Yvonne Ike, CEO Renaissance West Africa, it'd be great to maybe talk to us about possibly innovative financing structures for agriculture.
There's a value chain for agriculture, and we have different solutions for each type of them. One thing that I wanted to say very quickly is on the farmer side, we do need more government support type of funding, because the math in terms of bank financing typically won't work. And there, one innovation could be that where you have DFIs, international DFIs who can give money, that there is a collective that is created and supported in dollar as well as naira, and that we do have some innovative government guarantees. And those government guarantees can be tied into different departments. For example, if you have, say, a Diageo of taking some of that product and then getting tax incentives that are only given after they demonstrate that they have improved the agriculture sector, and there'll be key metrics for that. That money, that offtake can then be used to support the funding that is given by those DFIs locally. That's one thing. And on the markets, one thing we could do for the companies, again, another very important point, for a company to list, it has some basic fundamentals that must be in place. It must have a model that is financially viable, interesting, and typically will have a growth element to it. That's what brings the investors in. And there are a lot of investors waiting to come into Nigeria and into the sector. If we give them listed option structures that have a debt feature and an equity portion, so one example would be a market participation note. So Okomu would be a classic example. Long history of profits, low debt rate, and then you give them a nice, and then the investors get a nice equity upside. Investors would be very interested in that. The other thing that could be worth talking about is listed bonds. The minister mentioned it. It's important to stress that if we could have long-term financing, listed bonds, government bonds, where we make those available to along the value chain, because otherwise we end up in a situation where the financial markets and the capital markets will typically only go towards the agribusinesses and the food processors, as opposed to the more complex, more higher risk part of the business, which is the farmers. And they're the beginning of the story, and that's where the massive employment is created as well.
I think that's a very useful talking point, the issue of bonds. And I want to throw this open to the panel. How do we get the long-term financing to Nigeria's agri sector? Anyone want to pick that up?
Long-term financing is the key to the success of the transformation agenda for agriculture in Nigeria. As the minister said, they are going to restructure the agri-bank. And I think in restructuring the agri-bank, the first thing is that the Nigerian agri-bank should raise funds from the capital market, locally and internationally. The Agri-Bank of China did an IPO in 2010, and it raised $22.1 billion. That was one of the highest ever IPO raised. And now the Agri-Bank of China is about the fourth largest quoted company in the world, according to Forbes. So if we do the same thing, then we are going to start laying a foundation for long-term financing. The Agri-Bank can raise a lot of funds, and I think if we stretch it out, we can raise about $5 billion from the international and local market. And I also believe that the farmers can be shareholders. Again, the minister said that we have about 1.2 million farmers that are involved. those 1.2 million farmers, if you stretch it properly, they can take shares in the agri-bank themselves. It could be preference shares. International agencies can take shares in that agri-bank. Similarly, the National Insurance Company can do the same. Raise long-term funds so they can insure farmers at the primary level. And that way you find that anybody in the agri-value chain can access funds for long-term farming or agribusiness.
It's a very important point. The restructuring of the Bank of Industry is on the agenda. So, Michael, do you have any other comments to add to what he has said in terms of the approach to that?
One of the key words I've had today is innovative ideas to funding or financing agriculture in Nigeria. Some years ago, President Obasanjo started something in this country which to me should have been continued. He started across the country having formations of cooperatives. Everybody in the house, you will agree with me that with the work the Minister of Agriculture has done over the last 1 year, that the medium to large-scale agricultural enterprises in this country are getting a fairly good deal in terms of getting some financing. But it will also interest you to note that the small-scale resource-poor farmers account, as of today, for 80% of total production. And these are the kind of people we are talking about. How do we reach out to them? Interestingly, I did a study late last year, having a holistic look at agricultural financing, and it's intriguing to know that successive governments in Nigeria, since independence, have made efforts at coming up with ingenious ideas, just that most of them were not well thought out, so they failed midway and all that. But microfinance stood up. In fact, the NISAL of today, to me, is an adaptation or an improvement of the microfinance we had in those days. My problem with NISAL, very good. Farmers are accessing, taking good advantage of this, but still one thing is left. The small-scale farmers are still excluded, yet they account for 80% of total output in Nigeria. And this is where innovative ideas have to be thought of. There are international organizations across the United States. You have development agencies. It's good we heard of Bill and Melinda Gates this morning, the Ford Foundation. These guys have funds. These guys have funds ready for investment, especially in Africa.
We just need to
we need to tap
for them
into them to come and take advantage.
Ron, do you have a comment?
Just one thing, I think we're talking about the 80% smaller farmers, but we must remember that the largest amount of uncultivated arable land in the world is in Africa, and Nigeria contributes significantly to that. We have to focus on industrializing farming. In terms of the small farming, one thing, we need to keep the farmers focused on farming. And one of the things we need to do is help. A simple solution is having workshops, financing workshops for farmers, where they can go in and just in a very simple way. We have the technology now. We have the systems in place, short forms that people fill for them. There are ways to do this where they can raise the financing within 1 week. And that should be a target for us. And it's very simple, it's uncomplicated. Somebody who doesn't speak English, has never been to school, but is extremely intelligent and understands farming, and there's so many of these people that we have those simple solutions. At that end of the chain, the solutions are that simple, and government must be more heavily involved in that because it's less financially viable for commercial institutions to take place. It's more about the delivery and making it available, and that's what we need to focus on.
I think we need to go back to the basics. Innovation does not necessarily mean changing an established formula that works. Now, when I say back to the basics, if we go back pre-independence and immediately post-independence, you will realize that Nigeria led the world in terms of oil palm, rubber, cocoa, and I'm talking top 3. Indeed, I have heard the HMA give presentations where he says if you juxtapose from that time forward, if Nigeria maintained its position in production as number 1 or 2 in these crops, okay, we would be earning much more from these crops than we're earning from crude oil today. Now, think also about the fact that the fathers of independence, many of whom went to school abroad, were financed by warrants. They actually literally paid their foreign school bills with warrants. Now, the interesting thing is that all over the world today, farmers in Zambia, farmers in East Africa, farmers even in West Africa are sending their children to school abroad with warrants. Now, what is it that has happened all of a sudden in Nigeria that when warrants were a currency 40, 50 years ago, they are no longer a currency now? And these are the things that we have to fix, and these are the things that the Honorable Minister is pushing. Fundamentally, right, it will take a while. In fact, I'm not sure if it will ever come to the point where in Nigeria, the small-scale farmer is going to transform into this big industrialist. I think that small-scale farming still has a very, very relevant place to play for the next 20, 30 years. The issue is, how are they organized? Yeah. We established that every functioning agricultural value chain in Africa has what we called an angel, a guardian angel. It could be set up by the government in form of a board. It could be some company that finds out or believes that this value chain is so important that it's going to make the investment in organizing the value chain. And these companies or these bodies have the responsibility of putting these farmers into cooperatives, and it raises finance for the value chain and gives these farmers access to it. Now, I'll give you a simple example. Here I am, I'm a bank in Nigeria. Here I am, I'm a bank in Ghana. Here I am, I'm a bank in Zambia. Today, I finance hundreds of thousands of farmers literally in Ghana in cocoa. Yes. But how do I do it? The Ghanaian Cocoa Board, which is its guardian angel of the cocoa value chain, takes responsibility for borrowing internationally for the needs of the Ghanaian markets for the cocoa value chain. Every, I think it's 3 years or so, it issues paper internationally, okay? And this paper now, the funding is brought into Ghana. Now, various people access this funding depending on what part of the value chain you play, okay? And the pricing, you know, works accordingly. Now, there are also complementary infrastructure that must be in place. We've spoken about the fact that you need commodity exchanges, but very important, you need firm and sensible market infrastructure. So, how does the market infrastructure work? If we agree that there is a known price for cocoa, and if a farmer delivers cocoa of this value to this place, right, he should be able to sell it at that known price. Right. So the market infrastructure is there whereby you take your cocoa as a farmer to an aggregator, okay? He measures the quality of your cocoa, okay? And he issues you a warrant. You take that warrant to the bank and you get cash, okay? And this works down the... So now, in the context of Nigeria, this is extremely innovative because it doesn't exist today. Yes. But understand that this is what we used to do 40, 50 years ago, and we have to get back to that. I'm just giving you one example.
Okay, we need to move on. Balaji, you want to say something?
Yes, please. I think, you know, Iga set the cat amongst the pigeons, and these are really the fundamental issues that we need to focus on, which are going to unlock, you know, capital over the next couple of years. 30, 40 years ago, you know, in these markets also, it was able to do fairly basic securitized products around agriculture. And again, you know, these are the tools, you know, and opportunities, you know, that are available to us if we can deal with some of the foundational elements of understanding all the risks along the agri-value chain, and in particular trying to minimize market and price risk, which I think are the two critical ones that can be controlled by you. You can't control, you know, what happens with floods. You can't control what happens with, you know, rain or no rain. But fundamentally, when you can deliver some degree of price and market stability, you then begin to have, you know, properly functioning agri-finance markets. And I think even if the commodities exchange that's been set up doesn't work, by the end of this year, potentially you could have 3 marketplace providers in this market: the stock exchange, FMDQ, and potentially, NASD. And between these 3 market providers and operators, I think one of the key things we must do to support the leadership that the Honorable Minister is bringing to the industry is filling that gap or that lacuna that exists today, because the guys running the commodity exchange have refused to take the opportunity.
Right. Did you have a comment?
Can I come in a little?
Okay, very quickly, because we need to take another break.
I started a line of thought with cooperatives, which I didn't quite develop on. If you look, for those of you who are familiar with the history of U.S. agriculture, over the last 100 years, a key element to its development had to do with farmers coming together for leverage. Cooperatives. There's very little a small-scale farmer can do to access credit, whether it's...
I'm staying at that point. Who, maybe I can throw this out here too, who is going to organize the farmers to get this?
That's what I said. A couple of years ago, the government took the initiative and said, look, associations, cooperatives at state level, commodity level, whether it's soybean growers in Benue State, corn growers in Kano State, let them form themselves into cooperatives.
So we just need to encourage them to continue that.
Yes, I think it's a good vehicle for finance and outreach.
All right.
Just as Ike said, sometimes these solutions are in other places and we need to bring them in. So Export Trading Group is a group that the minister must know about, an East African company, basically is a commodity buyer. And they buy agricultural produce from farmers. And what they then do with the farmers is they provide them the seed, they give them the fertilizer, that way they're ensuring the quality of it. So this is a private sector. It's actually an individual who has a company that they've been running for about 20 years.
Totally private sector driven.
Totally private sector driven.
So there's that
across
opportunity
different
here as well,
countries,
perhaps.
and they're looking to come into West Africa. All they need from governments is really for them to create an enabling environment for them to operate.
Right.
And so they give them the seed, they give them the fertilizer, and they off-take the product from them at the gate. What then they do is, because of their own financial strength, they raise capital at cheaper rates from banks, and they also they've just had Standard Chartered Private Equity and Carlyle invest in them. And so they have PE fund money as well, so that they can grow fast, as they've been doing across the different African countries. So I just wanted to say that, again, we need to keep looking at what point of the value chain we're on. There's a lot that can be done by the private sector. And this is a classic example where literally hundreds or thousands of farmers around Eastern Africa so far are benefiting from a program like this. And the company itself is extremely profitable.
We hear more from the stock exchange and perhaps from you as well, Mr. But I need to take a break. When we come back from this break, we'll continue this conversation around Nigeria's agricultural sector and how we finance the agri transformation currently going on in Nigeria.